This is AdTechGod, and this is a word from our sponsors. RainBarrel is a cookieless, consented audience graph that helps advertisers interact with their best fit customers. Digital advertising shouldn't be a black box, which is why RainBarrel was created by media buyers for media buyers. With RainBarrel, a tourism board was able to exceed their campaign goals by personalizing their message to sensation seekers, one of 80 socio-ethnic segments known as etho-sense audiences. Get started with RainBarrel audiences on DV360, The Trade Desk, LiveRamp, and more. Or try out RainBarrel for free at rbarrel.com. That's RBARREL.com. This is a disclosure. Please note that all guests featured on the AdTechGod pod are invited to participate. They do not pay in any form to appear on the show. However, guests may be sponsors of the AdTechGod community, the AdTech forum, or other product offerings. Welcome to the AdTechGod pod, your window into the world of advertising technology and the people behind it. I'm your host, AdTechGod. Welcome back to another episode of the AdTechGod pod, the podcast where we meet the brilliant minds of our AdTech entrepreneurs. I'm your host, AdTechGod. Today, I'm excited to have a truly influential figure in the advertising technology space. Dave Morgan, founder and chairman of Simulmedia, is joining us. Dave has a storied history in AdTech, marked by innovation and leadership. For those who do not know, Simulmedia is a pioneer in TV advertising with predictive technologies and data-driven insights, truly reinventing the way television advertising is bought and sold. Dave is known not just for his executive leadership and founding companies, but also for his thought leadership, writing extensively on the future of media and advertising in multiple publications. While I've interacted with many in the industry, this is a unique opportunity to converse with Dave, who has shaped much of the AdTech landscape we navigate today. Dave, I'm truly excited to have you here, and welcome to the AdTechGod pod.
Well, thank you, AdTechGod. I'm excited too. I really like the work that you're doing out there in the industry, and the issues that you raise, and the voice that you deliver. So I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, my delivery isn't the most conventional, but I hope I'm still delivering value.
You are.
Dave, you've obviously been in this industry for quite some time. You understand it really thoroughly, and I've read some of your articles. I've heard you speak. But how did you get into ad tech, and how did your journey into this industry start?
I've been in it a long time. I came in an unconventional way, but that's mostly because the industry was in a very, very formative moment when I joined. I was originally a lawyer. I'm from Pennsylvania. I grew up in a little coal town in western Pennsylvania. I started college as an engineer, so I liked tech, but I preferred my liberal arts courses and went to law school. After leaving, I worked at a large law firm, and I left that. And then I worked at a trade association of newspaper companies that also ran a significant for-profit advertising services business, basically a large ad network of newspapers. You could buy in one place with one bill and one order and put ads in hundreds of newspapers across the country. And this was in the early 90s. And the big thing then in 91, 92 was this notion of the information superhighway was coming. And there were a lot of people talking about that it was going to plug into the back of your TV set. And literally, Bell Atlantic, a predecessor to Verizon, had a home of the future in Reston, Virginia that you could go visit. I mean, they had it for like industry people. And see this like vision where you could literally sit in a couch with a Air Mouse like remote on a high def screen and order pizza and have video on demand. And so I was pretty taken by that. And a lot of the newspaper companies were trying to understand what online services would be, how they might build video products, how they might better network with each other. And so I had the flexibility to be able to start getting involved in that and working with some early online services. This is pre-web. And then the web browser came out in like 93, the Mosaic browser, late 93. And it was pretty clear as people started to build towards it in 94 that this was going to dramatically reshape information availability. And I had this idea of, well, what will happen if you could, put ads on these web pages and you could manage them such that you could give different ads to different people and you could use the media. Everyone reads the let's say the newspaper website, because it's text and still photos, it was easier to deliver those in the early modem-based internet, and do direct marketing. To give different ads to different people. And I had this idea, but I was not very connected into the venture tech community. And literally I ran into someone at a conference in an elevator in Dallas, Texas, and I elevator pitched him my idea. And one thing led to another. I ended up getting to know him well. He was a venture capitalist, moved to New York City, and started one of the first ad serving companies. And, that would have been beginning of 95, late 94. So it's a bit of a long story, but it was so I've been around it for a while.
Yeah, it's incredible. What's the name of the first ad server? Is it Real?
Well, that was Real Media.
Yeah, Real Media. Yeah.
Open ad stream. I still remember when we first found out that when Netscape browser started, they released documentation, and probably I'm thinking May of 95 with this idea of a cookie and a token. The token would be what you do inside the session, and the cookie would survive sessions. And we were like, oh my God, this is what we've been waiting for, a durable identifier to maintain state. So there were a couple different ad servers being built around that time, but we realized, I and my chief technology officer, who I just had recruited, Gil Beta, that we could target differently that way. And so we did that. So we were at that point the only dynamic ad server. And it's been a fun and interesting ride since.
You went from, it was Real Media, then it was 24/7.
We were the ad serving software and ad network. And we got to about 600 people around the world. And we were private. And the public companies were really dominating the space. There was DoubleClick, there was Engage, and there was 24/7. And when the dot-com bubble burst, we were about to go public. We realized we couldn't survive as a private company because people were buying revenue all over the place. And the market collapsed. As we'd already priced, we were already filed with the SEC, and we were days away from listing. And we had just turned down $834 million for the company from Kevin O'Connor and Kevin Ryan and Jeff Epstein of DoubleClick. But at least I got to make that decision, so I don't regret it. I mean, it would have been nice, but we ran it independently for probably another year, and then we merged with Dave Moore. So it was sort of fun, Dave Morgan merging with Dave Moore. And we became sort of the technology back end for 24/7, what became 24/7 Real Media. And Dave and the team there, and a lot of them were, my team all on the tech side and finance side, just did an unbelievable job from 2001 to 2006, where they took a company that at one point its market cap was as low as, I'm thinking, $12 million, eventually sold it for 650. I mean, it was a journey.
I mean, you were briefly at AOL also, right, during that acquisition.
Yeah, so after I exited Real Media, and well before the transaction, so I knew we had recapped the company. I had reduced a lot of people, and it was startup time again. And so I started AdTechGod, which was really looking at what would be next. So if you look at Real Media, and the first phase of ad tech was basic infrastructure, plumbing, which is how do you serve the right ad to the right people at the right time, and how do you recruit a sales organization to sell those ads, because you had that, both parts were new, the tech and the service. AdTechGod was, how do you build the intelligence? What's the intelligence and strategy to know which is the right ad? And so we were the first to build a behavioral targeting platform. And then originally we're selling software to publishers to do behavioral targeting, but realized you couldn't really scale it well into the market without a network to sell it. And so then flipped it into an ad network. And then we sold AdTechGod to AOL in 2007. I served briefly at AOL for about 5 months, running a global ad strategy. And then I started Simulmedia not long after leaving AOL. I left AOL because fortunately I didn't have handcuffs, and they paid me cash. And then they were dumb enough to buy a social network for $800 million that was pretty worthless, Bebo. And I just thought that was way off strategy, and you can't run strategy if they do the wrong thing. And so I then had a chance to sort of think about what was next. And I believed that what happened on the PC would eventually happen on the TV. And we'd have IP delivered content and IP delivered ads, Internet Protocol delivered ads. And so I started Simulmedia a bit early. I mean, I would say turned out with hindsight very early, but really to bring a digital approach to TV advertising. And now we're 15 years into that journey. And finally, the whole market's now finally moving towards streaming and IP delivered video content on TVs. And
pretty impressive for you to have the foresight to see that happening. I worked in print, and digital came in, clobbered us in 2006, 2007. And it was a lot of senior executives pushing that print would come back and that magazines were the future and that this digital thing is a fad. I jumped ship, and I actually jumped purely into digital after that. And that was the right move for me back then.
To me, it was pretty clear that, in a physical delivered media world, distribution was scarce. So magazine companies, newspaper companies, even TV companies that have limited licenses from the government. Distribution is scarce, but attention is plentiful if you can acquire that distribution. And what these companies just had an incredibly difficult time understanding. And when I say these companies, I don't mean all the people in them, because you know this from your time in magazines, but the leadership and the people that get, quite frankly, a little bit fat and happy at the top. They thought it was all about the content that gave them the market, and they didn't realize it was all about the distribution. And so in a digital world where distribution is plentiful, attention becomes scarce, and they didn't have business models or the ability to do that. And so I think we really benefited in the digital world from all the people that came out of print between the late 90s and through the aughts that did know and understand that there was there was a better media opportunity on the other side.
It's incredible because I feel like you mentioned it's the guys at the top are just really comfortable sometimes. It's hard for them to move. It's just, it's hard to steer a ship, to be quite frank. Like it's not easy. So I do give them some credit there in terms of, I get it. You have a multi-billion-dollar company, revenues chugging away, multiple publications. Things are looking good 6-12 months out. But the inability to look forward 24 months, I think, is really what got them, because there were massive acquisitions happening. As digital was scaling, they just kept reinvesting into print. And I think just ended up with a bunch of dead publications, to be quite honest. And it's quite sad to have seen that kind of happen in real time. What do you feel in your life, in your career, Dave? You've obviously accomplished a lot, but what do you feel is the biggest milestone or highlight that you'd like to share today?
It's a living and constantly moving milestone. For me, the best part of this now 29 years in startup ad tech have been all the people I've worked with and careers I've gotten to touch. And I always say, I want to have companies that are great places to work and great places to have worked. I always wanted to be that place where the person that was frustrated with print knew they could go to really be the best they could be. And so the great milestones are I don't know, well over 2,000 people have worked for me over that period of time. And I love seeing how their careers are. And I try to keep in touch with a lot of people. And, it's great that, to see how successful they are and happy they are. And I sometimes even hire back people that used to be. I've had a lot of boomerang people here. But to me, that's the thing. And it's, I think that I didn't come out of a normal business background. I didn't start companies because I expected to be an entrepreneur. I expected to exit them and sell them for lots of money. I've been very fortunate that they've worked out for me that way. But what's been most exciting have been the people I've gotten to know and work with. And so it's maybe a weird way to look at the milestones, but it's I love the fact that the guy who's running finance for Google, all the Google properties, so number 2 in finance at Alphabet, John Su, I brought him into the industry in 98 at Real Media, and he ended up becoming the CFO of 24/7 Real Media, then the CEO. And I love that when Apple needed someone to run video advertising, they didn't hire a top person out of NBCU or the top person out of Hulu or Snap, they hired a woman who spent 8 years at Simulmedia.
No, absolutely. I think that's a huge accomplishment too. It just means, on your part, Dave, and on the company's part, like there's been contribution made to their growth, to their knowledge, and for them to just be better industry experts. That's a testament to what you're doing for people in their lives as well. So the next part is, the industry is obviously constantly changing. It moves really fast, especially right now in the connected TV space, which is what you focus on mostly at Simulmedia. But what are some trends you're seeing that are impacting the industry that you feel should be addressed or we should talk about today?
So I think some of the key trends, we're obviously seeing continued growth on the consumer side, the viewer side. We're seeing on the business side an increasing introduction of advertising into the streaming that's happening on the TV and the connected TV. We're starting to see a better understanding of how to best deliver ads into that environment. I think that the things we're going to need to understand are that we're seeing to the consumer, it's all TV. Like they've all gotten past any notion of like, what's its distribution methodology and who owns what part of it and how did it get there. To them, it's just they want the best experience they can possibly get on it. And it's all TV. And that may be long form, it may be short form. And certainly you talk to a lot of folks, particularly under 30, and YouTube is TV to them. And so, but what's interesting is the thing we as an industry need to address is the fact that it's not all TV to us. Each of us sees it in the own area that we live in, our own little balkanized part of it. And that's limiting. We see it as like even inside what is more conventional, legacy TV, it might be broadcast or cable, even though no one even knows the differences that actually means. And in streaming, it may be, is it on an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer, the device, or is it a packaged virtual package like a Hulu, or is it a programmer like a ESPN? And so I think we as an industry have to start really reimagining ourselves in the place of the viewer, because our capacity to control the packaging, the experience is really limited if we only see the viewer for the part of it we touch and we don't step back and see the broader experience. For example, like we have an amazing capacity to control and deliver more relevant and better controlled ads in connected TV. But any of us that watch connected TV know that we get way too much frequency of the same ads on all the same shows. And I think that's because we sort of live sometimes too close to like our keyboards pounding away and don't give ourselves the moment to sort of step back a little bit and imagine the experience that we're creating, or actually what's happening on the other side of the screen. We live on the back part of the screen, feeding the pipes into it, and don't think as much about what's happening to the people on the couch or in the chair in front of the TV.
The definition of TV is pretty clear. I think the definition of what is the content being consumed is still arguable. Like I've seen people dispute, is user-generated content on YouTube TV considered TV? In my opinion, yes, just not professionally produced or not from a huge broadcast kind of company. But at the same time, it's still television, and the creators are creating some really good content that is being consumed quite a bit. I mean, what's your view on the user-generated content being streamed on a television versus a professional production type of company?
I think that, quality is in the eye of the beholder. And so I think the producers like to think that they're the only ones that know how to do certain things, and people carry biases. But yeah, I mean, if people want to watch it and they like it, like when we had our first reality programming, it was a little weird and seemed lower production cost, but super exciting and entertaining. If you go back and look at more historical TV, production qualities weren't very good. Like they're really strong now in user generated. And, we used to have America's Funniest Home Videos, and that was all user generated. So it was the packaging. I think I like the fact that the new TV formats are giving us different product, different lengths, different amount. Like I love that Netflix changed. It didn't have to all be 30 and 60 minute or 120 minute. I like that you can change the way ads are deployed in them. And I think we'll see increasingly more short form. And that's what viewers want. And we just have to accept that and not try to impose a restriction thinking that we control the distribution, because we don't. I think that we have to be more flexible. Whatever the viewer believes is TV, primary screen, high engagement, lean back, that to me is what TV is. That's what makes it special. It's what's different than ambient video. It's different than like a video that shows up on a web page. It's different than, a screen in an elevator.
I agree with you. So Dave, what do you feel are some major trends in the industry that have some tailwinds behind it?
I think, particularly short form video is going to be really important and impactful. And whether or not Congress tries to force the divestiture of TikTok from ByteDance, like we're going to see those kinds of formats become more and more important. I think that retail media, the idea of closing the loop to purchase from advertising in video and connected TV is going to be with us. We've seen the announcement recently of Walmart's agreement to purchase Vizio, which will accelerate the combining together of viewing data and purchase data and a lot of inventory. So the retail media growth is going to be important. The growth of platforms and walled gardens. And there's a lot of people that bemoan the walled garden concept in these companies, each having their own formats and approaches to things, but recognizing that they all want to control their user experience. I think it's part of the world we'll have going forward. And that just means we have to understand how to work across it. So I think a really big trend is that the future of video and TV video is not just cross-channel, it's also cross-garden. And the companies and the people that are able to manage campaigns and advertising and ad tech in a cross-garden way, across Amazon, across Google, across Meta, across TikTok, will be long-term winners.
Like, what a coincidence for me. I actually just interviewed Miles Fisher from Roku yesterday, and we just chatted. And we were talking about that and retail media and really connecting the consumer journey from watching a television to consuming some sort of product or acquiring some sort of product was something that he talked about thoroughly, actually. So I'm looking forward to releasing that podcast as well, because it seems to totally align with what you're saying and what really the industry is talking about a lot right now. What are some things in the industry that keep you up at night? There's a few things that keep me up at night, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
So I'm fundamentally an optimist. You can't be an entrepreneur without that. I wake up every day excited about the opportunities and what we can do. I see a lot of problems out there, but problems are just places for solutions to happen. I do worry about ethics and morality of the industry. I think that because more of our transactions as an industry in ad tech happen machine to machine or humans on a machine to humans on a machine, we sometimes feel we can be a little less human about them and be a little less thoughtful about them. And so, that worries me. And I have a lot of confidence we'll overcome those things. But, it does concern me with levels of fraud that we have. And it does concern me with sometimes a real willful ignorance around issues. A lot of people are like, I really don't want to know what's happening there. And I have a lot of confidence that we'll solve those, that we'll work through them. But it does keep me up at night because I think that I don't think it necessarily helps the two constituents into ad tech that should be the most important, which is the consumer and the advertiser.
I've said this at this point probably a dozen times, but I feel like the purpose of ad tech is to serve both those parties. I focus a lot heavier on the marketer. We want to provide the right services and the right solutions to marketers for them to see the right return on ad spend, see the ROI on their campaigns. But I agree. I think we often ignore both sides of the spectrum. We kind of focus in the middle, and we live in the middle, and it's, how can revenue be generated and profits be made, rather than focusing on what is the right consumer interaction and the right consumer behavior versus, what are we delivering on for our marketer. So I think we need to tie it all together and focus on those two sides a lot more. Dave, your experience is incredible, and you're honestly, this has been an incredible interview. There's a lot of people who are starting in the industry or early in their industry. What advice do you give to them for people who are just starting out?
I think that AdTech offers so much for people for their careers. I think that there are very few places that you actually can see the application of technology directly into people's lives, where so much sort of happens, let's say, behind the screen or behind the phone, or that those that really, want to grow and learn and be curious can make a really big difference. It is one of the most important industries financially. For, depending on how you count it, 4 of the top 6 or 7 companies in the world in value are powered significantly or almost entirely by ad tech for profits. So coming into the industry, it's a great place to build a career. It'll be with us a long time. I think that it gives people a great opportunity to leverage the right side and left side of the brain, mathematicians as well as highly creative people. I think that going to places where you're going to learn, pick the jobs you're going to learn. Certainly the first 10 years of your career, don't be focusing on how much you're paid. Focus on how much you're going to learn. Obviously, if you've got student loans and things to pay off, take care of that. But first, about who you're going to work for, what problems you're going to solve, who you're going to work with, and then fair compensation. And when I talk to people later in their careers about the best bosses they had, where they learned the most, it's almost always that first job, and they talk about it. So picking that person well, and then don't be a shrinking violet. I think it's really important for people early in their career to speak up, to have points of view. I'm not a big company guy, so I know sometimes that's not always beloved in large organizations where they can be a little bit more political. But I think it's really healthy to have folks with strong points of view. I think that, not being afraid to sort of walk through the door and create opportunities when they're presented, or helping create opportunities on your own, working super hard. I think that, particularly early in a career, the amount of time commitment and focus you can put into your job can make a really big difference in how much you're going to get out of it. And being present. And I mean that in a couple ways. I mean it from everything from being in an office. I know there's a lot of disagreement around the ability to work remotely and virtually. And I don't want to suggest that remote and virtual work won't always be an important part of the future of work. But I do think humans can do things together, and face-to-face is good for a career.
I'm a supporter of the hybrid model, personally. I think in office 5 days a week is hard. In office 3 days a week, home 2 for me is the ideal number. Just so I get that interaction. And the other 2 days, it just gives me the flexibility to just kind of put my head down and not be distracted. Because I think as much as sometimes being in an office environment is beneficial, I think other times it's a lot of, talking at the desk and whatever. So for me, I think it's a nice balance on the 3 office, 2 home, even 4 office, 1 home. I think it just creates a nice work-life balance, plus that kind of independence to just work and get stuff done. Dave, that actually brings us to the end of the podcast. And I really wanted to thank you for being here, and thank you for your trust and support for all these years.
Oh, you're very welcome, AdTechGod. I'm honored to be part of it. And as I said, I appreciate your work in the industry, and I'm happy to have had a chance to talk about these things, and hopefully they will be interesting and helpful for your audience.
Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the AdTechGod Pod, a podcast for the people, about the people that make AdTech great. Stay connected with me for more insights, trends, and interviews in the realm of AdTech. Don't miss out on our latest updates, so follow me on X, Instagram, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget, ATG Slack community has insights, networking opportunities, and jobs. Keep the conversation going and stay at the forefront of AdTech innovation.